Welcome to the Pitch Your Pick podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into all the sports books, find our favorite plays, and pitch them to each other to find the best plays every day. I'm Joe. This is Jer. How you doing today, my man?
I'm doing well. I had a busy day at work actually today for once. It wasn't fun. But I'm tired tonight now, so we're trying to get this thing going.
Yeah, we're getting it going. It might be a bit of a mellow one, especially considering if we check out the plays tonight. That's what I have to say about it. It wasn't great. It wasn't horrible. RJ Barrett definitely cooked me on this one. You had some thoughts on Giannis barely cooking you on that one. Is what it is. I have quite the distaste for Middle Tennessee tonight after what they did. Just absolutely no showing. Their second leading scorer was a blistering 3 of 16 on the game. Just honestly only hit inside of the backboard. But the Heat did clutch out for you, and Auburn did clutch out for me. So it was still a 2-3 night. It wasn't horrible, but it definitely wasn't all we were looking for, I guess
Not
we'll
ideal.
say. So yeah, it is what it is. We'll start it off with a quick little NHL recap like we always do and just, get it going. But I said it earlier, I checked some things, and there's a lot of teams that you would normally talk about on a podcast. So it seems like you could be interested in it. So let's hear it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be more of a better night for prop bets. There's a lot of heavy favorites. There's a few good games like the Tampa Bay Lightning Pittsburgh game, or Carolina Washington, or Vancouver New York. But a lot of the other games are heavy favorites. Oh, and the Boston Vegas will be another good one. But I'm gonna look more at props tonight.
Okay, I love Vegas. I still just love
Vegas.
Anyway, for the NBA, I think we actually have a pretty decent slate of games. I don't think it's, again, anything crazy, but I think it's going to be a fun set of games. We have the Bulls versus Hawks, which I'm going to be diving into a little bit. Last time these two played, it was actually some DeMar DeRozan heroics to clutch at a very narrow win. Grizzlies and Celtics, two good top teams that we're going to be seeing go down here. The return of Kevin Durant is finally happening, going against the Heat, but this one's at home. So there's no Kyrie. I don't know why he didn't pick a different game to kind of come back so we could play with Kyrie. But, I don't make the decisions out here. We have a sleeper pick with the Raptors and Pistons. We can ignore that. Mavericks Warriors should be an interesting one. And we get to watch the Lakers and the Clippers, which I think you will be talking about a little bit later, which we love to see. We love to see. And then for college basketball, we have a decent little slate of games tonight. Houston and Temple, Illinois, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, Kansas, and TCU. This one's interesting because Kansas is still 10.5-point favorites despite TCU 2 days ago beating Kansas by 10. I just find that one a bit interesting. It might be a bit fugazi. Might be interesting to check out that TCU covering the spread. Just putting that out there. And then we have Arizona 19-point favorites. And Iowa, Michigan, which I have a personal bet on for Michigan to cover the spread, but I'm not going to make that an official podcast play. But I think the slate is interesting. We have some decent games. But again, I don't understand how you can beat a team by 10 and then are favored to lose 2 days later to the same team by 11. It just doesn't make sense. Like, maybe I would get still 5.5 and just call it a random upset, but 11 just seems crazy. Anyway, it's an interesting one, but we're gonna throw it over to Jared to start us off again and get back to the basics, back to the normal, and just have everything feeling right again.
Yeah, so Joe said we're going to talk about the Laker-Clipper game later. We're going to talk about
right
it
now.
I
like
because
it.
we got to get the Lakers slander out of the way.
I like it.
So tonight we're going to see, obviously, the two LA teams again, but it's not the matchup we thought we were going to see at the start of the season without I guess we thought we were going to see with Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis. But they're all going to be out tonight, and you never know on a nightly basis when it's possible LeBron might have an extra glass of wine with dinner and he might not want to play that night. So, but you know who's still there? Thank God, Russell Westbrook.
Oh my
man! I'm gonna take 2.5 points with the Clippers tonight.
Okay.
So the Clippers are starting to figure it out with their two stars. They're 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 games. On the other side, this Los Angeles Lakers team, who has still yet to even come close to figuring it out, they're 2-4 against the spread in their last 7 games with a push, and have failed to cover in their last 3 straight games. The last game pushed. Now we're starting to see reports come out that the Lakers and Russ have mutual interest in trying to get rid of him at the end of the season. I think, well, Russ is checked out mentally. I don't think it really matters because even when he checked in, he still stunk it up. These two teams have already played 3 times this season. The Clippers are 2-1 against the spread. Um, in the 2 games they've won, they covered by 6 and 6.5 points. In the game the Clippers failed to cover the spread, it was a Lakers lineup without LeBron but with Anthony Davis. So tonight we're gonna see the opposite of that. The Lakers have been a better team on the road this season. And unfortunately for them and mainly Russell Westbrook, this game's still in their home building, even though they're the road team. The Clippers, this Clippers team is still very much in a position where I think they can maybe jump a spot or two in the standings for the hopeful return of Paul George and Norman Powell, who they got at the trade deadline to try and make maybe a sneaky playoff run. I think this whole Lakers team is just checked out. They finally realized that this isn't gonna work. And I think the slide they're on is just gonna keep getting worse. The Lakers are 1-6 against the Clippers in the last 7 matchups. I don't like the Lakers' chances tonight to take it. So I'm gonna ride with the Clippers with 2.5 points.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with everything that you said there. This is basically a tale of two teams. The Clippers obviously just have as bad of injuries as the Lakers have had throughout the season, but the Clippers role players have stepped up in the absence of Kawhi and Paul George. And then you have the Lakers where anytime LeBron or AD is not on the lineup, you can basically chalk it, call an L, and just move on. And just whatever the spread is for the other team, just bet it on that. It's such a vast difference. And I love the slander to Westbrook. I mean, that man is averaging 12 points per game inside the crypto.com arena. Love the new name to it. It's just, yeah, everything bad for the Lakers is currently happening right now. And I'm honestly kind of surprised it's only 2.5, if I'm being honest, but
Yeah.
it is.
It's the first ballot Hall of Famer, though.
Oh, for sure. Anyway, let's get it off the stinkers. It's starting to smell like trash in the room right now. So we're going to bring it over to the Bulls and the Hawks and just ignore the Lakers for the rest of the night, unless you have a prop, which I hope you don't. Anyway.
I do not.
Anyway, we'll bring it to this Bulls and the Hawks game. And if you had to guess who I'm going on, you probably would get it right. We're going with DeMar DeRozan, and we're going with the points, rebounds, and assists, just because it's simple, it's easy, and I like it. Because DeMar DeRozan in his 3 games against the Hawks has just absolutely cooked these guys. Really hasn't even been a problem for him. In the last game against the Hawks, which was on the 24th, I was talking about how he had some late game heroics, which actually covered the spread and picked up another podcast play. Thank you, DeMar. 37 points, 3 assists, and 6 rebounds. With his current at 42.5 points, rebounds, and assists, that easily covers it right there with 46. The other matchups that they've played against the Hawks were in back-to-back ones here, where DeMar had 28-4 and 35-10-5. So one game he didn't cover this 42.5 against the Hawks, but the other 2 he did. And do we really even need to talk about the fact that DeMar has been absolutely hooping for the last month now? If you actually look at it, he has hit 40 in his points, rebounds, and assists in every single game of his last 13, besides the most recent one to Miami. But how can you blame him? That's Miami. You got Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo that you're trying to score on. For, DeMar, it's just a little bit tough for him. Now, before this Miami game, DeMar was averaging 35.5 points, 5.3 assists, and 6.2 rebounds a game. And this Hawks team is 26th ranked in defense, and they're still playing without John Collins. And both these teams kind of play at a very similar pace as well. So I think it's going to be pretty nice. Now, the only other person that I could see putting up a problem for this Hawks team against DeMar is DeAndre Hunter. And I don't like the odds for Hunter to lock down DeMar really at all. And even when he gets to the paint, Clint Capella is really not enough to scare DeMar DeRozan either. DeMar is, I think, 6th in drives, or 15th in drives per game, somewhere around that top 15 range. Also gets to the line a lot, but lucky for the Hawks, they don't actually foul too often and put people out the line. I think the most free throws that DeMar has actually attempted against the Hawks has been either 7 or 8 this season. So, that is looking good for them. But Hawks are one of the worst teams when it comes to points allowed into the paint, with DeMar DeRozan also being just that mid-range assassin and guy that can just get to the hoop. I just don't think this one is looking too great for them just all around. Now, the one thing that I do see as concerning is that Trae Young is listed as questionable for the game tonight. So if Trey doesn't play, I could see this being a pretty handedly Bulls blowout where DeMar just doesn't really play a lot of time. And if that's the case, then I'm not going to love this pick at all, obviously. But if Trey plays, this is obviously going to be a lot more competitive of a game. And essentially, if you let DeMar sneak up on that 40 minutes mark, he's probably going to hit this over.
I have no disputes on DeMar. You'll learn why soon.
All right. Well, let's find out why right now.
Let's find out why. Okay, so I'm talking obviously same game.
Same game.
And I've made this exact same play before on the podcast, except on a different spread. I'm gonna take the Bulls laying 4.5 points on the road tonight.
Yep.
The Chicago Bulls have been on fire recently. They've covered 7 of their last 10 games. But they actually failed to cover in their last 2 games and lost both straight up. The Bulls have only lost more than 2 games in a row once this season. And tonight they get to face an Atlanta team that they normally dominate. So I think they're gonna come out for some revenge tonight.
Yeah.
So far this season they've played 3 times, and Chicago's covered the spread in all 3 games. In the last game they played on February 24th, they won by 4, laying 2.5. And it took about 5 contested shots from Bogdanovich and 26 points out of Danilo Gallinari to keep the Hawks in that game. I just think this is a bad matchup for the Hawks. They have nobody to guard DeMar DeRozan. Joe mentioned Daniil Hunter, but I talked about him in the last time I made this bet. He's 360 something in defensive win shares. And I think Nikola Jokic is actually what is unlocked DeMar's new potential, actually. In Toronto, we always played with centers that played around the basket, like mostly Valanciunas. And there was always someone in the lane and wasn't allowing DeMar to get to the lane. But I think with Vucevic there, that opens up a space, and DeMar's just got free runs to the rim this year. And Atlanta's been an up and down team this year. As I mentioned in the last game, I thought John Collins' absence would be big. And it didn't really actually matter too much because Danilo Gallinari scored 26. But I don't think you can count on that again here. And as Joe said, Trey is questionable to go with some sort of ankle issue. So who knows if he's playing, who knows if he's not. I still like it if he does. The Hawks are 4-6 against the spread in their last 10 games. I think the Bulls are a perfect counter to this Hawks team. I like the Bulls to win and cover and sweep both season series against them straight up and against the spread. So I'm gonna ride with the Bulls.
I like it. I mean, you just again further proving my point. I think it looks bad for me if Trey doesn't play, but it looks great for you if Trey doesn't play. So yeah, I'm hoping for Trey, and you can hope for now. I'm hoping that it's not obviously nothing too serious, but I want him to just play in general so this game stays close. Because anytime you let DeMar get into a close game in the 4th quarter, you can basically guarantee the Bulls are almost going to win that every single time. DeMar's got the ice this season. I love
it. Putting up 15 points
by himself
in the 4th.
I love it. In the final 3 minutes, maybe. Anyway, to wrap up just a full NBA slate, I guess I'm gonna be bringing it to the Grizzlies and the Celtics. I forgot to mention I was gonna be talking about it, but we're gonna be talking about it. The Grizzlies, and the Celtics, and this one is purely just a matchup that I like for the Celtics, and that's just because. I'm going for John Morant, and I'm going to be picking his under on his points because it's set at 30.5. And against a Celtics team, which we'll get into just in a second, that is as good defensively as they are, especially at defending the rim, I just don't really see Ja getting up to that 31-point mark on this Celtics team just because I've looked at some comparable teams in defense, and it's just not looking good. So for this Boston team, they actually are damn good at guarding the rim. Ja is 3rd in the league in total drives to the basket. So obviously a lot of his bread and butter is getting into the paint. And I think he's number 1 in most points per game in the paint this season. But they're facing a Celtics team that are 2nd fewest points in the paint per game allowed and are the 4th best guard defense across the board, while being a decent center defensive team as well. I mean, you're looking at Marcus Smart out there on the perimeter guarding John Morant. And then as soon as he gets by there, he has to go through Robert Williams, Al Horford, things like that. The paint, it's not an easy time for John Morant, I think, on this. And although Ja has been hooping, I just think this is a tough matchup for him in general because the Celtics are just a great team defense. Brad Stevens has always had his guys, locked in on the defensive end. And I think Ja's, inconsistency from his shooting is really kind of tough. I see this as a game where the Grizzlies kind of have to play more as a team and really get this dub out together instead of letting Ja just, go for 52 and let him get his dub on his own. So if we're looking at these two other teams that are in that top three for fewest points allowed per game, those are New York and Miami. And Ja only had 20 against New York and 23 against Miami. So it's actually looking like a trend where he goes against those teams where they guard the rim a little bit better. And he tends to not necessarily struggle, but he just can't really, get to his 28 point per game average, which is understandable for anybody. And given the fact that he's had so many great games in a row recently, I do think he's kind of due for a bit of a pullback, I guess. But the one thing that I don't love about this is that Jaylen Brown isn't going to be playing. He is another defender for the Boston Celtics that could obviously help them at guarding Ja. But I already kind of assumed that Smart would probably be taking that matchup on Ja anyway. And then you would kind of just put Brown as like that freelance guy to pick up whoever else, they feel like they need. So I think in general, I just think the fact that Boston is so good defensively at what Ja's bread and butter is, and the fact that this is set at Ja needing to get 31 to cover this, I'm just not really loving that over. So I'm going to stick with the under 30.5 under here.
Yeah, I don't mind the under. I probably wouldn't bet either side of this.
Yeah.
Because I think the Jaylen Brown thing is massive.
It can be a very big thing.
I think because I just think Ja Morant's that one of those guys. He's so athletic, so fast.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna tire defenders out. You need more than one guy. And I think like if they had both of them, like Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown, to just throw out like Marcus Smart plays a few minutes on him, then Jaylen they spell each other off. I think they're both phenomenal defenders.
Yeah.
Just if Marcus Smart has to take him for 30 minutes, what happens down the stretch when he's been sitting in the chair for 25 minutes in a row?
Yeah.
And he's in his last 3 out of his last 4, he's had over 40. One of them he had 50. He's just torching people.
He is torching people.
Given that's Portland, Chicago, and the Spurs, who aren't necessarily phenomenal defenses.
Especially at protecting the rim, which is why I think
but like I also don't hate the under because he's not great to the over. He's only hit it in 5 of his last 10 games. He's only 37% on the season to that total and 43% in his last 30 games. I don't hate it, but yeah, I just don't know if I'd bet it.
Yeah, it's also, I think the Celtics have been playing some of their best basketball as of late. We were having a conversation outside of, podcast time. We were saying that it always just seems like the Celtics in the first half of the season before the All-Star break are kind of just like, yeah, whatever. We're going to win some games, lose some games. I don't really care. And then as soon as the All-Star break is over, the Celtics are just trying all of a sudden. And they're actually like, all right, let's get our dubs out here now. So, again, I don't love that Jaylen Brown is going to be sitting for this game. It doesn't even have any injury listed as of right now. And with the NBA, we never know. He could actually play for all we know. I honestly have no clue what's going on there. But I do like your point that obviously you have to throw a few bodies. But what I could see happening for the Celtics team, given, obviously Tatum is not a guy that you want to have guarding Ja most of the time. But he is a nice, secondary defender that you can throw after, maybe Ja burns him. And leave a guy like hopefully Bane or somebody, let Jaren Jackson try to shoot you out the game. I think could be a strategy that they try and see if that limits Ja himself. Because if we're really looking at it, if you can take Ja out of the game for the Grizzlies, that's really where they're at their worst. So I would expect that plan from the Celtics. It's just all about whether Ja cares or not and still dunks over 3 people.
Yeah.
That's really the question. So,
yeah. I just don't. Yeah, this isn't like when point totals get this high, I get squirrely on them.
Because it's like, yeah, you could definitely see Ja dropping 31 points, but at the same time, 31 is a high number, obviously.
Yeah, like 30 and a half. Like 31 points in any NBA game like makes like a headline, right?
Yeah.
Like it runs across Sports Center and says Jaw drops 31 points. No matter like who scores 30, it's always going to run. It's a 30-point triple double. It's a 30 10 30 whatever. People don't care for like 20, 25, 27, but when I feel like that 30 number is huge. And scoring like it's not easy to score 30 points in an NBA game.
Yeah. Obviously, we couldn't even score one.
Exactly. High five.
All right, so I think we'll wrap it up there. Have a bit of a quick episode. We'll set up that daily pick screen so you guys can just see them all in short format. Or for all you cheaters that just skip to the end, don't be that guy. Go back to the beginning and watch the podcast or listen to the podcast all the way through. Don't be the guy that skips to the end. Anyway, we'll set that up and we'll see y'all in a second.
I forgot.
5, 4, 3, 2. All right, so here are today's picks. DeMar DeRozan over 42.5 points, rebounds, and assists at -108. The Clippers at -2.5 versus the Lakers at -110. The Bulls at -4.5 versus the Hawks, again at -110. And John Morant under 30.5 points at -113. And make sure you check out the wonderful Prop Dr. J Twitter for any other ones that he decides to trail tomorrow or later today, on all of those wonderful things. And maybe I'll tweet out one or two. I like to keep them to myself though. Anyway, if you guys are listening to this podcast on any of the podcast platforms, make sure you could leave us that wonderful 5-star review. If you're watching it on YouTube, like button, subscribe button, and leave a comment down below on what you guys think of the podcast tonight. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this one. I know we enjoyed making it. Make sure you guys go out there, make some bets, and make some money.
See?